Hi, and welcome to Talk Data to Me with myself, Craig Stewart. Joining me today, really excited about this one, Merelda Wu, who is the co-founder and CEO of Melio.ai. Merelda, how are you doing? Thanks so much for being on the show.
I'm great. Thanks, Craig. It's a little bit chilly in Joburg, but yeah, everything else is good.
Absolutely. I think the weather's starting to close in a bit, but if I look outside, if you look at the sun on my face, we certainly can't really beat Joburg winters, albeit it's probably only about 9 or 10 degrees at the moment.
Yeah.
All right, Merelda, tell me a little bit. So yourself and Greg started Melio some time back, but tell everybody out there a little bit about the company, what it is that you do, how you got started, and also like what made you make the jump into starting your own company. It's something I'm always fascinated by with other entrepreneurs.
Cool. So Harry and I actually started the company about 3 years ago. And initially, what we realized is as a data science consultant, I built like these super fancy models and I really struggle to put them into production. The journey is just super long. I keep complaining about the deployment problem to Harry, and he's a DevOps engineer. So he's like, well, most of whatever you're saying is already solved. So then that's when we put our heads together and we're like, no, we think there's a gap and there's a need in the market. And I'm really passionate about helping data scientists really get their work seen, get their work out there. So that's when we started Melio. And what Melio does from day one is our mission is just to make AI more frictionless. And by that, we mean we want to help data scientists and the businesses commercialize their models and just make sure that they get that return on investment of whatever millions of rands that they put in.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me a little bit about how you came up with the name Melio. I'm always interested as well at how I find when I started my business, one of the toughest things was actually to find a name. Dale Brook Media. A lot of people ask me if I've got two kids named Dale and Brook. It's not true. It's actually named after Dale Brook in Cape Town. It's a great pool, cafe, etc. How did you come up with Melio?
So we wanted a name that is like has a Latin origin. I actually don't know why, because it just sounds cool.
Yeah.
And Melio in Latin means imagine. And back then, what we want is to imagine a future where it's really easy to deploy AI solutions. But there's also another meaning. It's called sharp corners, but we prefer the imagine meaning.
Yeah, for sure. Good choice. I like it. I like it. All right. And how have you found the journey of starting your own business as an entrepreneur? Forget about the technology side, because obviously that's kind of your bread and butter. What were some of the things that you found to be the most challenging and rewarding, probably, starting your own business?
I think so there's this book that I love. It's called The Hard Things About Hard Things. And there's a quote that particularly resonates. And it is, as an entrepreneur, you have two emotions, euphoria and terror.
Nice. Yeah.
Mostly terror, but there's a glimpse of euphoria.
Yeah.
And I feel like the most challenging bit really is just there is no path for you. Everything is unknown and you're making the best decision that you can at the moment, but there isn't a path of, okay, now I'm a junior data scientist, I become an intermediate data scientist, and I become a senior data scientist. Everything is like you kind of spray and pray.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a key thing. I think there's always this sort of journey of commitment, but doubt, and then you kind of keep going forward. And I think that's why some are successful and some are not, is that you're able to kind of go through those hard things and kind of see the other side, rather than kind of throwing the towel in and saying, it's actually just too difficult, so I'm going to go back to 9 to 5 salary, all the sort of safe things, but probably less rewarding at the end of the day.
Yeah, but really, to be honest, the most rewarding thing is we feel like it's growing a baby, like you're growing something from its infancy, its concept, all the way to now we have 9 people, and like I still wake up with night terror and night sweat of, oh my God, what are we doing here? But there are days where the teams just work so well together and you're like, oh wow, this is something that we created.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, good stuff. Okay, let's get into the sort of, I guess, the more sort of technical side of things. We're going to be talking mostly about ML ops, today. You talk a lot about putting models into production, and that's really where MLOps has kind of come in, because I think for a long time, and many of the conversations I've had in the past with people in data science, machine learning, etc., is that exact thing. They kind of develop these great models, but they never actually end up in production for a number of reasons. Maybe talk a little bit about why models often don't actually end up in production. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into that. There's all the data engineering, the data sourcing, all that sort of thing that goes into it. Understanding the business problem, maybe that's an area to work on, but they never actually end up being utilized. You said there's just no return on that time investment and any other money that's gone into that. What are some of the blockages that you've seen?
Yeah, so I think there's two main ones. The first one is the easier one to solve, actually, is that when data scientists develop the model, we start with an experimentation mindset, which is quite difficult actually for engineers even, and for businesses to understand. It's that we're just trying to see what the data tell us and what we can actually do with it. Sometimes it leads to nowhere, and sometimes you get massive rewards. But when we are doing experiments, a lot of the times data scientists don't follow a very rigorous and stringent process of once we see there is some value, how are we going to get across the engineering line? So back a couple of years ago, when the developers throw their code to the DevOps engineers, now it's the same issue of data scientists throw the code to ML engineers then package it and throw it over again to infrastructure engineers. And it's just not a good, so what we call it is actually the lack of long-term thinking. And it's actually a difficult balance, long-term thinking between quick returns. So it's a very difficult thing that I almost feel like it's intuition based, and more senior data scientists actually do that a lot better because they've seen the failure modes. And the other problem is the misalignment between the business and what they're asking for and what they actually want. So I feel like that's almost the number one reason that I've seen, at least in South Africa, why the models don't get put into production, is because people are a little bit cold feet. It is a very expensive journey to go on. So they hire junior data scientists and then tell them, we want this, with a very vague business requirement. And the junior data scientists give them what the business needs. But there is a lack of communication of what we actually want is this group by query. It's not your deep learning model. And that a lot of the times is a much harder problem to solve. And what we find actually works very well is just talk to a more senior data scientist, get a consultant in, 10 grand, validate your problem, and then use your junior data scientist to solve it.
Okay, all right, good advert there. I'm quite interested in that sort of misalignment between what business needs and wants, and you're talking about things like deep learning and obviously machine learning. And I think, to a large degree, business doesn't understand that. And similarly, especially a junior data science doesn't really understand business and business speak very much. So there's the misalignment kind of comes almost from a language barrier, I think. Both speaking English, but one is speaking business and one is speaking, technical jargon and everything. How do you work with companies to overcome that problem? Because I think for me, that would unlock so many issues down the line. And as you say, the long-term thinking is, I understand it now, see where the model's going to provide value. I'm not scared off by things like deep learning and statistical regression and all these sorts of things that come out.
It really is a curiosity mindset that I think both parties need to have. We're just coming to sit down, have a conversation of what it is that, so two questions that we really love to ask. The first one is, what keeps you up at night? And the second one is, what is stopping you from doing what you need to do? And those two things are usually it's process bottleneck that sometimes data science can solve quite easily. Sometimes it's actually just a process issue. And you don't actually need data science. And it's actually really difficult. When I first started my journey as a junior consultant, a lot of the times my seniors will tell me, hey, like we need to produce business value. And my question is always, what is business value? Like, what do you mean by this? It's such a vague thing, right? But then the more you speak to your stakeholder, the more they'll tell you, oh, I'm really stressed that we won't meet this month's target because of X, Y, Z. And then you're like, okay, well, we can't solve that. But what we can solve is we help you identify X. And start from there. Start from something that's small that you can validate very quickly.
Yeah.
And I remember I used to hate the word quick wins because I almost feel like it's a shortcut and it's not scientifically rigorous. But from almost a value perspective, it's always really good to have an overarching goal and have a lot of steps underneath and tackle the quick wins while you're looking at your long-term, this is my goal that I'm eventually getting to. But if you only work on the big goals, people lose momentum and people lose focus, and the companies get restructured.
Absolutely. And in terms of that, how much importance do you place on co-creation of the model or the data product? You know, so being the data science team or the data team and business itself having both almost equal parts to play in developing that model.
Yeah, I think co-creation is the most important thing that you can have. It's not just, at least from an MLOps perspective, it's not just the business, it's the business and the data science team and the engineering team, if there is a separation between science and engineering. And I think what you've alluded to is 100% correct, that the business has to be along the way all the time. And if they can give us a product owner that really sets direction and help us prune the backlogs, that's going to increase your success rate, I think threefold at least.
Okay. Yeah, and I think, you know, we talk about actionable insights and people actually using the insights rather than saying, it's really nice, it's really clever, you know, what your model does and what it tells us, but we're kind of just going to do it our own way. And that for me has always been such a massive bottleneck, or something, I guess, that's eroded trust, I think, in the data science field profession. What it is that you do is that people just don't actually use it and then see the benefit because they just don't understand or they're scared to use it.
Yeah. So one thing that we find is quite helpful is that you always validate a lot of your assumptions very often with the business. So a lot of the times we get a bunch of data sets, we have our own internal assumptions of, I guess this 3 months salary means it's the 3 month salary or something, right, for this column. But a lot of context is lost. So what our team likes to do is just to generate an insights pack that is, hey, this is what we're seeing from your data. Can you validate these? And from there, we can almost more clearly identify what the business needs because it's something in front of them, and our own assumptions of, is this actually solving their needs, or do they know this already? Because sometimes I find things that's in the data that I find super fascinating, and the business is like, no, but like, of course, you could have just asked me. It'll save you 2 weeks.
Yeah. All right. But I think that open conversation is, I guess, the way that you work around those sorts of things and say, this is what I'm finding. What do you think? We know about it. That's fine. But this is also interesting. So I think just keeping those open lines of conversation, probably the route to success. Now, I want to go a little bit into how MLOps helps. We've talked a lot about, you know, people battle to get things into production. And I guess some of the culture sort of bottlenecks around that. How does MLOps as a framework actually help this whole process? And I think it's something that over the last probably 18 months has become, you know, a lot more, I guess, embedded to a degree in organizations. I hear a lot more people talking about it. How does it actually help? For those listening that go, I get all of this, but how does MLOps really help us?
Yeah, so MLOps from the technical perspective, it is delivering value continuously, just like DevOps, right? Delivering values for your data and for your model iteratively to the business and continuously. So the fundamental principles that underpin MLOps is a lot around automation, a lot around continuous integration, continuous delivery, but because it's data, so continuous training, continuous testing, and there is also a lot of compliance aspects that is often overlooked from the beginning. So those are more the technical area of what MLOps try to resolve. Is you have a valid business idea and a valid machine learning case, MLOps then help you go from that conception to the deployment in a very seamless way through automation, through versioning, through reproducibility. But what a lot of people that I see is battling with now is that there are a lot of MLOps tools out there, and people think that, oh, okay, if I have Kubernetes, if I have this, if I have Azure DevOps, then that means I'm doing MLOps, so then I don't have MLOps challenge.
Yeah.
But MLOps is actually more, like you said, it's a culture, not really revolved around the tools and technologies. I think that's something that is still missing or it's still not being really tightly grasped in the South African context, actually in the world.
Yeah. Okay. And what have you seen in terms of the number of companies or the maturity of MLOps? What's that growth look like? Is there a trajectory that says there's a lot more MLOps frameworks being put into business, or is there still kind of just little pockets of where this is being done?
Yeah, so there's definitely been an uptick in terms of MLOps being put into practice, but I think there's still a lot of scope to improve. In most of the contexts in enterprise, what we see is they use some mostly end-to-end frameworks, but it doesn't work that well with their existing systems because of tech debt or legacy. And then you break the seamlessness of the MLOps infrastructure. So I think that's one of the challenge. And from the startups or SME perspective, most companies aren't even thinking that far. They just want to get a model into production and then use it. And they're not really thinking about, oh, I have to version, I have to reproduce, and I have to do all of this. But I think part of the blame is the MLOps ecosystem is just way complicated. Okay. So I read a stat that a data scientist from a high-tech company, from having an idea to deployment, uses 11 tools. And they say every single tool that you add onto your technology stack means you have to add one person to look after that tool. So that means you have to have a 12-people data science team. And for most organizations, that is just not sustainable.
Sure. Yeah. All right, good stuff. Merelda, in closing, maybe, and without giving away too much of what it is that you do at Melio, what are maybe the 3 key pieces of advice you can give to people listening to this that are, on their MLOps journey? I'm not sure that's the right way to put it, but are looking to put in MLOps to, I guess, really speed up the productionization of the models, and I guess the success of that, because you can speed it up, but still may not work, but actually make sure that the models that get deployed get used within the MLOps framework. What are maybe the 3 key pointers that you'd give to people?
So the first one I would definitely say is long-term thinking, and linked to that is skills development. So what I mean by that is data scientists or engineers shouldn't be too boxed in of this is my job description and this is only the thing that I'm focusing on, but look a little bit further down the line and see how you can help your colleagues, help each other to make this process a lot easier, even if you have to go learn something new. And I think that's the beauty of working in the data science world, right? You're always learning something new. So it's long-term thinking, skills development. And I think the last one is be humble and curious and speak to people as much as you can. Don't work in isolation, especially in your organization, because then that's how you create silos and that's how communications break down. But I do have a bonus one, and I think I don't see that enough in South Africa. It is very technology focused, even though I say MLOps is not technology. It's that Kubernetes is being used as a standard framework and standard tooling in the standard infrastructure in most parts of the world. And if you think your organization wants to embark on this journey, it is almost illogical to not skill up on your cloud native engineers and your cloud native infrastructure.
Okay, perfect. All right, good advice there from Merelda. Merelda, thank you so much for joining me. Always great to chat to you, and we'll touch base soon and see how things have progressed with you, Harry, and the team at Melio.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Craig.
Absolute pleasure.